You started.
It feels so short.
It's the couch. It's just, so you started teaching at Princeton just last year. How's it going? Like a lot of arches.
Yeah, a lot of arches, a lot of ways to get lost. Lots of roads to nowhere, so you walk in, walk up a staircase and there you are, and you got to turn back around and go back down.
They've got to spend the endowment somehow. They said 4 staircases in this building. We'll put in 4. So you're enjoying what you've taught so far?
Yeah, it's been an adventure.
Good. You have a PhD in American Studies.
I do.
What do you do with that?
Whatever you feel like. Well, when you have a PhD, you're lucky if you can get a teaching job. Otherwise, you're working at Starbucks or doing whatever else you would do with a PhD. But American Studies, we decide anything in America is worth studying. And so we can look around and we can decide, yes, that's my project. Pretty much anything. All-nighter with David Drew could be a thesis in American Studies, if they had a thesis.
God, I wish this gave me any kind of academic credit. Oh man. So we mentioned you had this autobiographical one-man show. I Was the Voice of Democracy. What was that about?
It's a show that I started doing a few years back, and it tells a story of when I was 17 years old. I, on a whim, entered a patriotic speech writing contest called The Voice of Democracy. And I wrote a speech, recorded it on a little tape recorder, and sent it on in, and had no idea that I was thinking I might get a little prize at the local level, and then it went on, and I ended up in first place national out of more than 300,000 kids, and paid for my first year of college, because it was like $14,000 scholarship, which back in the day would pay for a whole year at a place like Brown.
That gets me a quesadilla at Frisk.
Yeah. Understood. Times change.
Well, so that's so in that I imagine dealing with, because this was what year was this?
This was 1986.
So this was when democracy was like, this was a hot topic. There was still an opponent to democracy.
Yeah. This is when that Russian supervillain thing actually was like legit. I mean, there's other kids that wrote their speeches, like you got to listen to them, and they were like talking about putting like weaponized satellites on the moon aimed at Russia. I think it was the speech from Michigan. She was all about like sort of weaponized satellites all day. And here I am writing my little speech about like, I have feelings. And I want people to be happy, and so I don't know what happened.
Liberty, equality, weaponized satellites.
It was amazing. I read through all the speeches, and everybody was making policy recommendations, and there I was going, I stood hands in pockets watching the winter sky. I mean, it's one of those examples of like sometimes it's worth being the outlier because they go like, oh, we can't decide between all these weaponized military apparatus. Let's go with the weird guy under the tree.
Every other kid wants to start a nuclear war. Which one do we pick? So you've toured this all over the world.
Well, I don't know about all over the States, and then a little brief jaunt to the Middle East. And I actually grew up in New Mexico and Saudi Arabia, so it was my first time going back to the Middle East.
That's cool. How was that? Was the show received well?
Yeah, it was very different. I mean, one of the things about the show is it's sort of very, I think it's very sort of sweet, and like the politics are not that like, whoa. But it's, and so there's times when I'm performing it in front of my fancy pants performance studies colleagues and friends, and they think I'm just sort of goofy and sweet and lame. And I go and I do the same show where I'm sort of out in the show and I'm talking about sort of political, like just being sort of the kind of politics I do in the speech. And in both Beirut and Abu Dhabi, it was like, oh, this feels sort of edgy. Like the reaction I was getting was like, oh, I guess all politics is local and is totally contextual, because I was just thinking I'm a goofball, and here I am here, and I'm going, I'm feeling like I'm pushing at the boundaries of society. But that's been the good thing about the show, is it sort of works. Wherever you put it, it seems to work okay.
That's really cool. When you I'm sure you had thought about this experience before winning this contest. What made you decide that like a one-man show is the way to express it instead of writing further about it, or you know,
Well,
why a performance piece?
Well, I had tried a couple different ways. I mean, I thought about it in the early 90s. I was hanging out in New York, and there was a lot of solo performance. It was the moment that solo performance sort of had its big moment. And I was thinking like, oh, I've got that story. I should do that story. But it was like, I couldn't figure out how I would like turn the technology was so complicated, because you would have to have like actually a slide projector, and you'd have to make slides, and you know, it was just all too, and I just couldn't quite wrap my brain around it. And so then I was like in graduate school, and I thought like, oh, I can write a very serious, searching academic essay about this and about the rhetorics of democracy and how youth internalize the rhetorics. And I started, and it was terrible. And so abandoned it. And then there was just this moment where I had an opportunity to do sort of collaborate with some folks. And I just thought I was going to do it. And I had had all this box of these pictures, the audio recording of me at 17 giving the speech. I had all this stuff, and I figured like, okay, I'm going to finally do it. I'll put it up for a weekend in Albuquerque, and I'll be done with it, and I'll put it in the box. And then just very quickly, it just started getting invitations, and sort of moved around. And the last time I did it was here in Princeton in September, and it is sort of on the shelf now. But I got an email not long ago from somebody who said, "Would you bring it to Iceland?" And I'm saying, "I will definitely take it off the shelf to go to Iceland." And then I've got some other shows in the works, and so.
What else are you working on?
One show that's a sort of a story suite, like a sort of a mix, like each night would be sort of a different set of stories. So it's called Boy Like That. And another one's called Touch Tones, which talks about the job I had right after I graduated college, where when I went to New York and was a struggling theater artist, the way I paid my bills was I worked as a phone sex operator. And
Whoa.
You know, so
that slipped through the cracks of our research.
There's some material there.
So as a performer who is going to be unemployed upon graduation, how can I get a job as a phone sex operator?
You gotta talk to the what were their names? The Kims?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you got to do some time travel back to the early 90s. That's the only time you can do phone sex. You know, because now it's all about the webcam. And that's a whole other thing. I mean, you can still work a webcam angle, but it's just a whole different.
Speaking of the internet, we were looking at your website. You have a tab on there called, or your whole website is called Stinky Lulu.
Well, that was an old blog I had, yeah.
Okay, what is Stinky Lulu? Can we click on it if we're at work? Now, given what we know about you, I really don't think the answer.
Yes, you can click on Stinky Lulu. Stinky Lulu was a blog I ran for a number of years. When you had blogs, you know, like.
Right, now it's all out of Tumblr.
Yeah, it was very much like, it takes me back to 2007.
I was born in 2007.
Remember 2007 when you had blogs? You know, and because I started when it was like, when you might not even remember this, when people would like have nom de blog, when they would come up like Stinky, like where they would have a persona that there would be this idea that you could hide on the internet underneath your blog persona. It's so quaint. But that was Stinky Lulu started, and it was always in the third person. You know, all this kind of silly stuff. But I ended up writing about supporting actress nominees, like old movies, and just writing about these old movies. And because the internet is the amazing place that it is, I ended up making all kinds of really interesting friends and had like thousands of followers that read my things, that read my posts every week. And I met some pretty impressive writers and scholars and filmmakers through the blog. And so it was just this chunk of my life in terms of figuring out how, like it was right when I was in the middle of a PhD and not finishing the PhD. And it was totally in that sort of one of those, some of you seniors here might recognize, that sense of spiraling despair when you've got a deadline and it's just not happening and you really could give a shit.
This is not water in my cup.
Yeah. And so
Pure vodka for days.
So Stinky Lulu saved my life. Stinky Lulu got me writing again and got me to the point where I had the confidence and the sense of purpose to finish and get the PhD, and here I am.
So I should just hand in just my blog post instead of my thesis.
No. But you should use your blog, use the show to build your spirit, to build your sense of confidence, your sense of I can do it. Yes, I can.
I want to. Can you just stand behind me as I
First, imagine me on your shoulder. Yes, I can. We can all say it right now. We can all say it right now. Yes, David Drew, you can. You can, David Drew. You can. You can, David Drew. You can. You can.
That was a nightmare. I had.